So 2 Mondays ago, I basically asked whether in this episode you wanted a video on mental health at Oxford or a video on applications and interview, and I got requests for both, but the vast majority were about mental health. So that's what I'm going to do today. I actually feel like I've written a book in preparation. I don't script Oxvlogs, but I actually wanted this video to be pretty complete, so I can guarantee two things. I've done a lot of homework, and it's going to be very long, and probably, I don't know, probably a bit boring in that there's not going to be cutaways. I'm literally just going to be talking to the camera. Okay, also, I feel people watching probably have common sense, and I shouldn't need to say this, but just in case, blanket disclaimer, this is not aiming to substitute any professional advice. In fact, this is more informational than advice. I'm not a professional. If you know that you're struggling with mental health, whether you're diagnosed or not, then please go to a doctor and please go and see someone who will be able to help you, because those people are there to help you and you deserve that help. This is more advice or kind of things that I've noticed through my own experience and from speaking to other people. It won't necessarily match anybody else's experience or, reflect anything in particular. I feel it's necessary to say that just in case. So without further ado, let's start. I feel first of all, perhaps I should mention why I'm really keen about talking about mental health. I have had mental health problems in Oxford and I am generally pretty open about it. I don't want anyone to say, oh Inês, you're so brave for talking about this, or pity me or anything like that. I don't think it really makes me brave. I think more people should be open about these experiences because most people will go through something like this, maybe not as severe as me or maybe way worse than me, but it's not uncommon, and as they say, there's a stigma surrounding mental health. I really don't think there should be, and to be honest, as soon as I started speaking about it and getting help was when things got better. So I've got obsessive compulsive disorder and just kind of generally I'm very prone to anxiety, and I also have Tourette's, which means I tend to make lots of random noises. I don't swear, but I will repeat other people's phrases sometimes, and I'm quite tired right now, and I actually had a really bad weekend Tourette's wise. So there is a high chance there will be a few tics in this video, and whether you see them or not will depend on if I fancy editing them out or not. OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder. It's an anxiety disorder characterised by obsessions, which is just lots of repetitive thoughts, and compulsions, because these obsessions tend to cause anxiety, so then people perform compulsions or rituals in order to alleviate that anxiety. Kind of works in the short term, but in the long term actually perpetuates that anxiety. I have actually made videos to do with OCD and Tourette's in the past, so I won't go into huge amounts of detail, but those are basically my two nemeses. And anxiety is pretty common at Oxford. A lot of people, I think, will probably also experience depression. I know in my case it's always been secondary to other things going badly, so for me, treating the primary cause that's making me sad will generally lift that depression. And I do receive help for my OCD. I take medication for it and it's proven to be tremendously helpful. And currently I also see two people. I was on a very long waiting list for the NHS, so I'm now seeing a psychologist for that. And the university also provides mentors for people who ask them, so I also see a mentor who knows about OCD once a week. And I am honestly very pleased and happy about that. And I do not think there is any shame in admitting that you're receiving help or that you need help for mental health. Anyway, now comes the meat of the video. It's a bit of a mishmash of stuff that me and other people think, are things that could make things a bit more difficult in Oxford. Starting with very academic stuff, you'll probably hear people speak about essay crises a lot. You're working on a problem sheet or an essay or something you've got to do that's academic and you feel counts for a lot, and you find it very hard to finish or get started or proceed. There's some point where you get stuck. That is actually pretty common. It can be linked to perfectionism and also something known as academic procrastination. The psychologist from the NHS that I'm seeing actually described this curve of productivity, which looks a little bit like that. And it's productivity on the y-axis, arousal on the x-axis, arousal being level of excitement or stress, not, sexual excitement. Basically, if your level of arousal is low, that is you're bored with your work, your productivity is also low, When it's kind of intermediate, then you tend to be very productive, but if you get too stressed, then your productivity goes down because you get jammed. So he says, you should always try and aim to find that little sweet spot, and sometimes it can be pretty hard. I know I tend to go very quickly from boredom to completely stressed out. So yeah, I think over the years I've kind of found the right way to get to that central bit. I think this is tremendously linked to perfectionism. Oxford tends to instill the feeling that you've got to make the best piece of work and it's got to be better than everyone else's. And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. So of course you don't want to start, because as soon as you do, you feel you're under this massive pressure. So I think it helps to, something that always helps me, they say there are 2 types of theses, or 2 types of essays, or 2 types of YouTube videos. The perfect one and the one that's finished. And you know which one you want. The finished one. Sorry, I'm looking at notes, I'm going to be looking at them. Linked to that is imposter syndrome. A lot of people describe feeling like perhaps their tutors made a mistake in electing them to come to Oxford. It's very normal. Everyone else always seems very talented, they do all kinds of things. I'm sure some people probably think that of me, and I know I definitely feel that way about loads of people, and in the end I think we are all just people trying to get by. So it's a very normal feeling to have, and trust me, if your tutors picked you to come to Oxford, you deserve that place. You earned that place, and they chose you for a reason. And obviously Oxford is a place, or well, Oxford or university, because I think this could apply to anywhere. I'm sure it doesn't just happen in Oxford. It's a place for being able to get better. You're here to learn. Obviously, you're not going to be perfect when you start. If you're perfect when you arrived at uni, you wouldn't need uni. I feel that's kind of obvious, but I do know that you can feel that way quite often and perhaps feel a bit like a fraud. Other things, so these are the 2 that are most academically related. So another thing that tends to be quite problematic at uni, I think, can be eating disorders and food. I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail because I don't think that's going to be helpful, but an eating disorder is to do with mental health. It's not quite to do with how you look. It's more to do with your relationship with food, and it's generally a negative one or an unhealthy one where there's a lot of stress surrounding food, or it's used for emotional reasons. A lot of people, it will be the first time they're cooking for themselves, or basically they have full control over what they eat, especially if you've been, living at home with parents and they make food for you, or other people in control of that. So that is something to bear in mind. Another one, interacting with other people and personal boundaries. Defining what a healthy personal boundary is going to vary for each person, but basically you want to aim to have healthy personal boundaries with people and not have people overstep yours, and obviously not overstep other people's. And the thing is, this can take many shapes and forms. It could be someone you've just met who, I don't know, is maybe flirting with you or wants to go further with you than you want with them, or it could be a really good friend, but they're just taking up a lot of your time, or they're just, overstepping that boundary. They're making you uncomfortable in some manner, or it could even be a partner. So anyone in theory could overstep a personal boundary, and what is a personal boundary that makes you comfortable varies for each person. So something that I certainly felt I had to learn at university was learning that I didn't have to be pleasing other people and accepting people breaking my personal boundaries so as not to upset them, but being assertive, and when people were, getting too close to me in manners that made me uncomfortable, to be able to just tell them, please don't do that, I don't like it. Anyway, remember that you define what your boundaries are, and if someone doesn't want to respect them, then perhaps you don't really want them around anyway. And goes without saying, but respect other people's boundaries too, because they could be different to yours. This one was one that someone brought up and they said I should mention, loneliness and isolation. I feel I've been quite fortunate that I haven't really experienced this at university, but I know it is a thing for many people. I don't really know what to advise in that case. I think quite often when people do feel lonely, I think they're worried that other people aren't going to get them, or that they won't want to be friends with them, or that they will think they're weird. And actually, I do completely get that, and I have been hung up about that a lot in the past. But the truth is, I think a lot of people feel that way, and most people are more than happy to have new friends, and you don't have to be a perfect friendship match with someone to be friends with them. In fact, complementary friends tend to work really well. Another thing I have on my list is sleep, weather, and change. I think quite a lot of people can experience sleep problems. If you're stressed, insomnia is quite common. whether that be taking a long time to fall asleep or waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep. I have met and spoken to quite a lot of people who've had trouble sleeping, and to be honest, I don't think I really sleep as well as I should. So I would say that sleep hygiene is very important, and especially in the era of phones and tablets and laptops, it's very hard to keep that, and I know I definitely don't, but I should, and so should you, because sleep is very important. I have also pulled all-nighters whilst at Oxford, but I would also really advise against doing it, and wherever possible, if you can lie in without missing any lectures, then get that sleep if you need it, because you are going to perform much better having 8 hours of sleep and working 4 hours than pulling an all-nighter and working 10 hours. Many few people can perform on low sleep, and being sleep deprived really does not help you with concentration or learning the next day. Another thing that really worried me about Oxford was the weather. I come from a really sunny part of Spain, so even in the winter there, I really hated it when it was dark at 6 o'clock, and right now the sun is setting at 4 p.m. and the day's really short. So I actually have this thing which emits light in a frequency similar to that of sunlight, and you're meant to put it in front of you in the morning for 20 minutes and in the evening as well if you want. I'm actually finding it pretty helpful. You may notice I'm pretty illuminated. That is thanks to my softbox, and that's also doing a pretty good job of filling in for that sunlight that is missing outside. So yes, weather is a big one. That said, I actually think the weather in Oxford was way better than I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be raining all the time. It is kind of cold, but it's not as cold as I thought it would be. And it does rain a bit, but I don't know, in Spain when it rains, it does rain a lot. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plains. Change. So change is another big thing, obviously, because when you start at university, it's basically a new period of your life. And for some people, that change is going to be huge. If you're coming from another country, you're saying goodbye to a place you grew up in and moving to a place that's going to be completely different in customs, weather, people. You know, in my case, I came from Spain. I actually moved to Oxford when I was underage. I was 17 for my first year at university. So I went from, you know, living with my parents and having all my Spanish friends to having to adapt to this completely different weather, to living alone. You know, basically, suddenly I was doing a lot more things by myself, which was great, but it was a huge change. Not a negative one, in my opinion. I think one of the things about Oxford is you learn a lot, and it's not just about what you learn in lectures, but all the life skills that you pick up from having to fend for yourself and, you know, becoming mature as a person. But with these changes, there are two more things that I wanted to mention. Culture shock, that might sound a bit drastic. This will probably only apply if you're moving in from abroad. I think culture shock can sometimes go a bit undetected. It usually takes a while to kick in, about 3 to 4 weeks in a foreign place. And even though it says, you know, it says culture shock, it's not really a shocking thing. It's basically when you're accustomed to a set of customs and habits, when you move to a new set, those can be very different. And I probably did actually experience a degree of culture shock coming from Spain, which is actually geographically not that far, but the way people are is completely different. People in Spain are really chatty, and I can tell that I'm jabbering away right now. And yeah, I don't know. In Spain, we'll say hi to each other on the street, and I guess the way you interact with people is completely different, and that was one of the things that I disliked the most about Britain at first. I felt that compared to what I was used to, people were very closed off, and I felt that people didn't really want to get to know me. I think it has worn off. I definitely do miss Spain, and this leads to my next one, which is homesickness. And I think this will resonate with plenty of people, because when you're accustomed to living at home and you're not living at home anymore, it's natural to miss your parents or your friends, especially if you're not enjoying life at the moment where you are in a new place. If you haven't made friends as good as the ones that you had back at home, or you're used to seeing your parents and now you're not seeing them as much, it's normal to be homesick. All I can say about that is it does get better. I used to get homesick by week 4 to 6. By the end of my undergraduate, I would hold out till week 8. Fortunately, now I'm much better at not being homesick, although actually I'm feeling a bit sad thinking about it now. Totally did not get emotional about talking about home. yeah, I think as a grad student, I am mostly better at not being homesick so quickly. I go home twice a year for my birthday in the summer and my mum's birthday, and in the winter for Christmas. But I won't lie, it does get hard, and especially if someone starts to talk to me about Spain, then it's almost like it opens this little Pandora box where I think about all the lovely things about home, and especially in the winter when everything is considerably more pleasant at home than it is here where it's dark and miserable and cold. And, you know, I miss home a lot. And then you start to think about friends and parents. I'm meant to be making a video for cheering people up, or at least giving helpful advice. I think there's a time and place for actually being emotional and missing home. I don't think the point is to never feel upset or not listen to your feelings. And I think it is natural to feel homesick. So I don't feel bad about, you know, occasionally feeling homesick or really missing home. It would be a problem if it was constant. But actually, as long as I stay pretty busy in Oxford, which Oxford will do that to you, it'll keep you busy with work and other stuff you do. So it's not a problem most of the time. But people do often get homesick at the start. And then the last one I wanted to mention, someone mentioned it to me, homophobia, or I guess more generally if you're any member of a minority. I don't want to talk as much about this one. I do actually identify as LGBTQ. I technically identify as bi or pansexual. I do have a boyfriend, so as far as the world is concerned, they wouldn't necessarily know that I identify as LGBTQ, although I do. Personally, I haven't had any homophobia directed at me. I have witnessed it in Oxford, but yet I would still say that compared to where I come from in Spain, I would be a lot more comfortable being open about my sexuality here than I would back at home. So I guess because of that difference, I feel like Oxford is actually pretty good, but I do know that Oxford is nowhere near as diverse as, say, London, and I also know that I definitely don't see as many LGBTQ couples open on the street as I know there are. So that might be something to bear in mind. I think most people have had a good experience, but I have heard sad stories. But again, because they're not directly things I've experienced, I don't really want to speak on behalf of other people. But I did want to mention it because it might be something that someone is thinking about. And for many people, their gender, sexuality, identity, any of these potential minority groups will be very important to them. And to be honest, it is important to me, but it's not something that I personally experienced, but it doesn't mean that others haven't. If you've actually watched this far, then thank you so much, and I'm really sorry this went on forever. And I guess if you're at Oxford, or even if you're not, I'd love to know what your concerns might be with regards to mental health. Is there anything that's worrying you? Is there anything you'd like to know more about? I know Jenna made a video on self-care, and I know she mentioned some of the places where you can find help in Oxford, and I think Ellie, one of the previous Oxvloggers, has also done that. But if anyone needs any kind of link to places of support, I used to be the welfare officer, so I have plenty of those resources available, and there are plenty of places in Oxford full of people who are there to help you and who want you to succeed and to do well. So I don't want this list to put you off applying to Oxford, but more so just to know what things to maybe be aware of before coming. Yeah, I'm waffling. Let's end it here.